Welcome, dear listener. Let your shoulders soften. Let the hush of evening settle around you like a gentle shawl. You've come to a quiet place now where time no longer rushes, where stories bloom like petals in the hush between moments. Tonight, I'll tell you a story made not of days or hours, but of the tender space between them, the space where breath pauses, where clocks hesitate, where something once forgotten stirs again. This is the story of Nora and the love she didn't know. She remembered. Until the hour between heartbeats. So let your thoughts grow slow and soft. Let the rhythm of your breathing match the whisper of night. Close your eyes. Or let them drift, and come with me now, into the quiet where time stands still. It began in a house that always smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Nora stood in her grandmother's attic, soft dust in the air like sleepy snowfall. The light came in through a round window, pale and gold like memories. She hadn't been back here in years, not since her grandmother passed, leaving behind quiet furniture, oil paintings that watched kindly, and a chest tucked under the eaves. A chest full of things that once mattered. Nora opened it slowly, velvet lined inside. There were old letters, tied in faded ribbon, photographs of people she didn't know, smiling in sepia, and at the bottom, a small pocket watch in a worn leather pouch. It was simple, round, a little scuffed, the silver dulled by years. It didn't tick. She turned it over in her palm. No ticking, no sound, but something. Something else. When she held it against her chest, there it was. Not a tick, but a beat, faint, steady, not mechanical but warm, like a pulse. She stood still for a long time, listening, not to the room, not to the attic, but to something deeper, something in the hush beneath thought, and in that stillness she felt it, a quiet take, like longing wrapped in light. Later that evening, with the watch by her side, she lit a small candle and sat by her window. The sky outside was turning blue-gray, a soft storm of dusk creeping in. She touched the watch again. No ticking, just that slow, quiet thrum. She held it close once more. And for a moment, just a breath, the world stopped. The curtain paused. In its sway, the trees outside stilled mid-rustle. Her own heart waited. Then the moment passed. The wind returned. The sky dimmed. But something inside her didn't move forward with it. Something had stayed. In that delicate in-between, she went to bed that night with the watch resting near her pillow. And as sleep tugged at her edges, she dreamed not of places or faces, but of a hallway of clocks, all silent, and one gentle heartbeat echoing between them. And when she woke, the morning felt quieter than it should have, as if something had come close but left no footprints behind. She made tea. She fed the cat. She opened the window. The watch lay on the table, still and warm. She touched it again. No ticking. But as the wind stirred the curtains, she swore. She heard her name, whispered from somewhere just beyond the hour. The next evening, Nora returned from the market a little earlier than usual. She walked slower than she used to, not out of tiredness, but from a feeling she couldn't quite name, as though time itself had loosened its grip on her days. The watch sat where she'd left it, resting gently on a folded linen cloth beside the window. Outside, the sky was a blur of lilac and softening gold, and the hum of evening birds drifted across the sill. She made tea chamomile with a touch of honey and carried the cup to her favorite chair, its fabric worn smooth where her grandmother once sat. The watch she cradled in her palm, feeling again for that impossible thrum. And just as the steam curled from the tea, the moment stretched, not dramatically, not with thunder or trembling air, but softly, the way a breath is held before a kiss. That never quite happens, the way the hush falls before a snowfall. She noticed first the quiet. Not the kind of silence you get in a sleeping house, but something deeper, as if the world itself had forgotten to exhale. The steam froze mid-curl. The birdsong faded mid-note. Even the flame on the candle held its flicker like a painting. She looked around slowly. Everything shimmered faintly, like moonlight held in glass. And then she stepped just once, and the floor beneath her foot didn't creak, didn't respond at all. The stillness was everywhere. She moved to the window. Outside, the trees were frozen mid-sway, a leaf hovering in the air, suspended mid-fall. The sky held its breath, and yet she was not afraid. There was no panic in this place, no wrongness, only calm, a hush as wide and soft as dusk itself. She walked slowly through the house, past the old grandfather clock whose hands no longer moved. She passed mirrors that held no reflection, only shimmer, and at the back door, she opened it to find the garden still blooming. Each flower paused in its own quiet dream. It wasn't until she stepped barefoot into the grass, soft and cool beneath her, that she noticed the sound, a heartbeat not hers, not from the watch now left on the windowsill, but ahead. In the stillness, like a quiet drum, deep in the earth, calling, she followed it slowly, as if through water, each step gentle, each breath matched to the pulse she could now feel in her chest, like it had always been there. She walked until the garden gave way to a path she didn't remember, one she was sure had never been behind the house. A narrow, cobbled lane, lit by lamps that did not flicker, but glowed steadily, like fireflies holding their breath. And there, at the end of the lane, stood a man, not moving, not quite real, and yet not a ghost. His posture was still as the air, but his eyes moved, and they were looking at her as if she had been gone a very long time. And in that quiet between one breath and the next, her heart remembered something her mind did not, something old. Something soft, something like love. Nora didn't speak at first, and neither did he. The space between them was gentle, not silent, but filled with something softer. A hum, like the memory of a melody you can't place, hovering just behind. The heart. The man stood with one hand resting lightly on the curved head of a cane, but he didn't lean on it. He simply held it, as if it were a habit from a lifelong past. His clothes were old-fashioned, not theatrical, just quiet, a dark coat, well-loved at the edges, a scarf tucked neatly beneath his collar. Everything about him spoke of stillness, of waiting without bitterness. When he finally did speak, his voice was low and slow, a sound that felt like dusk. "I wondered when you'd hear it," he said, not accusing, not eager, just gently. "Glad," Nora tilted her head. There was no fear in her, only a hush inside her chest that seemed to echo the rhythm of his words. "The heartbeat?" she asked. He nodded once. "It's not mine," he said. "It's ours." He stepped closer, the space between them shortening like a held breath. His movement was liquid, quiet, as if he too were walking through this moment like it was made of velvet ear. "I've waited here," he said, between the seconds. A pause, a soft smile, between the heartbeats, where time doesn't forget. Even when people do, Nora's fingers tingled where they had once clutched the watch. Her voice, when it came, was just above a whisper. "I don't remember," she said. He looked at her gently. "I do." And somehow that was enough. They walked together not far, just down the dreamlike path beneath trees whose leaves hung mid-fall, gold and deep orange in frozen motion. They didn't speak much. There was no need. The rhythm of their steps, the occasional brushing of their shoulders, and the quiet awareness that they belonged in this pause, it was all the conversation. They needed a bend in the path. They stopped. There was a bench stone, softened by moss, and they sat. The lamps above glowed without flicker. The air smelled faintly of old roses and warm rain. And somewhere in the hush, a faint tune played, a music box perhaps, or a waltz the world had forgotten. "I was waiting for you," he said after a while. She looked at him, not startled, not even curious, just present. Like the stillness itself had brought her here. "But I didn't know," she murmured. "You didn't have to," he replied. "The heart remembers, even when the mind cannot." He reached toward her, not to take her hand, but to brush back a strand of hair that had drifted across her cheek. His fingers were warm, real, and in that brief touch, Nora felt something unfurl. Not memory, not yet, but knowing, a deep, gentle knowing that she had been loved once and was still. And as they sat in the soft place between seconds, with the world asleep around them, a quiet thread of closeness began to weave itself between their hearts again, not rushed, not dramatic, just a steady pulse, like the one she'd felt in the watch, the one that was never ticking but always beating. They stayed on the moss-soft bench for a while, not to wait for something, but because there was nowhere else they needed to be. The world around them stayed suspended, a quiet canvas painted in twilight hues. Time, once a ticking thing, was now simply a hush, a soft breath held in the cradle of evening. The man whose name she still didn't know, or perhaps had simply forgotten, glanced at her with a smile that didn't need words. And she returned it, as though they had shared this smile 1,000 times before. After a while he stood, offering his hand. Nora took it without hesitation. His palm was warm, his fingers gentle but steady, like the rhythm of a lullaby. They walked together into the glade beyond the trees. The path gave way to a clearing filled with gentle light, not moonlight, not sunlight, but something between, like the glow of memory. Petals floated on the air here, though no wind moved them. And above, in a sky that never darkened, stars blinked slowly as if they too were beginning to remember. "Do you know this place?" he asked, his voice as soft as leaves brushing cloth. Nora paused. She looked around at the stone fountain in the center, its water caught mid-arc in silence. At the weeping willow leaning toward the pool. "I think I do," she whispered, "but not from this life." He smiled again. Not sadness, just tenderness, like something long protected. "You used to read to me here," he said, "in the life before the one you remember. You always had cold hands and a warm voice." She laughed softly, a breath more than sound. "That sounds like me." They sat again, this time beneath the willow. The long strands of its leaves hung like curtains around them, making a private world out of quiet green light. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small book, its pages delicate, edges gold-touched, as though kissed by light. Opening it, he didn't read. Instead, he passed it to her. She turned the pages slowly. There were no words, only images not drawn, but remembered, a hand brushing a shoulder, a shared cup of tea, a dance in bare feet across a wooden floor. Moments so soft, so full of breath and warmth, they didn't need a name. And as she turned to the final page, she saw them, herself and this man, sitting exactly where they were now, beneath the willow. Hands almost touching. She looked up at him, her voice barely a breath. "What was your name?" He reached forward, not to answer in words, but to take her hand at last. And when their fingers met in the stillness between heartbeats, she remembered a feeling, not a memory. The warmth of his coat, the way he'd once watched her across a quiet room. The sound of his breath beside hers as they drifted to sleep, lifetimes ago. "Jonas," she murmured, as if the name had always been on her tongue. He nodded. "You never forgot," he said. "You only stopped listening." And there, beneath the willow, hands entwined in a world where clocks did not tick, they simply sat, not reunited, but returned to a place that had always waited. A love that had never hurried, a knowing that was never gone, only sleeping. And as the petals drifted around them, soft as snow that didn't melt, the pulse between their joined palms beat quiet and true. The world around them glowed in shades of almost night, almost morning, almost memory. And yet everything felt complete. They no longer spoke, not out of silence, but because silence now spoke for them. The stillness was full, not empty. Each shared glance, each breath between them was a chapter written not in words, but in warmth. Nora leaned her head gently against Jonas's shoulder. He shifted slightly, so that the fabric of his coat folded softly against her cheek. It smelled faintly of cedar, rain, and something like home. And in that moment, she felt not young, not old, just whole. "I was always afraid I'd forgotten too much," she whispered. Jonas didn't move. His voice came low and slow, like the hush of wind before sleep. There was nothing to forget. It was only waiting, just like this. She closed her eyes for a moment. The heartbeat, soft and rhythmic, pulsed beneath her ear. Not from him alone, not from her, but from the space between them. The pocket watch, far away now in the house beyond the still world, lay quiet on her windowsill. Its hands unmoving, its face serene, but Nora knew now, it didn't measure hours. It measured presence. It measured love. A soft light flickered through the willow's leaves, not bright, but golden, like fireflies caught in honey. Time. Whatever it was here seemed to nod gently, as if satisfied. Jonas drew his thumb slowly across her knuckles. It was a small gesture, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken yesterdays. "I think," Nora said softly, as if waking from A long dream, we never truly parted. No, he agreed, eyes distant but peaceful. Love that waits is never really lost. They sat a while longer, until even the stars above seemed to drift in slow motion. Not far away, the frozen fountain began to move just slightly. A droplet hovered, trembled, then fell, and with that, the spell, if it was a spell, began to soften. The leaves stirred. The petals floated again. Somewhere, a wind remembered how to move. Nora looked to Jonas. His face remained calm, but a gentle shimmer outlined his form, like candlelight through mist. She didn't panic. Instead, she smiled a quiet, tearless smile. The kind that comes when something beautiful touches you in a place deeper than thought. He reached for her hand again, pressed his lips softly against the back of it, then whispered, "Even if the hands never move, the heart keeps time." And then he was gone. Not vanished, just faded into the quiet, as though he had returned to the space between beats, to wait once more. Nora sat for a little while longer. Not alone, just with herself. And when she finally rose, the willow stirred to let her pass. She walked the path back through the glade, the stone lane, the garden that now rustled gently with wind. The house welcomed her with its familiar scent, lavender and thyme. She stepped inside. The pocket watch still lay on the windowsill, its silver warm in the moonlight. She picked it up, pressed it to her chest, and smiled. There again was the heartbeat, soft, steady, home. The house was quiet again, but not the kind of lonely quiet that aches in the corners of an empty room. No, this quiet was gentle, filled with breath, with memory, with peace. Nora moved through the rooms slowly, her fingers brushing the worn edges of furniture, the spines of books long asleep on their shelves. Each step felt softer now, like she was walking not on wood, but on something made of light. She set the watch on her bedside table, just beside a small lamp whose glow was as pale as starlight. Its hands still didn't move, and yet it felt full, like a heart resting between beats, content. Outside the window, the sky stretched wide and velvet, dotted with stars that blinked in a rhythm she felt deep in her bones. She sat on the edge of the bed, not yet ready to sleep, but already drifting. In her mind, she saw again the glade, the weeping willow, the way Jonas looked at her, not with yearning, but with recognition, with patience, with the kind of love that doesn't chase time, but simply waits for it to soften. She curled beneath the covers, the fabric cool against her skin. And as she sank deeper into stillness, the heartbeat returned, not from the watch, not from memory, but from within. A rhythm old as breath, steady as stars, quiet as love. Her thoughts moved like clouds, slow and silver, carrying fragments of him, a smile in candlelight, a page turned beneath a willow, a voice like dusk. And somewhere in the hush between sleep and dream, she heard him again, not in words, just presence. She smiled, eyes closed now, her body relaxing into the hush. A soft sigh left her lips, not of sadness, but of returning, because some loves don't need clocks, they don't need stories, they simply are. And even when lifetimes stretch between hands held, they always find their way back to the space between seconds, to the hour between heartbeats, where nothing is rushed, where nothing is lost, only remembered, only felt, only loved. So rest now, dear dreamer. Let your thoughts grow slower than time. Let the stillness hold you, warm and weightless. The heart keeps time, and in that time, love waits for you always.